Hello, so in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create custom actions in multiple different ways uh, so you can actually start using code along with your system. And at the time of this recording, the actions that come with uFrame are very limited, so this tutorial should be very helpful. Um, but I expect very soon that the action library, since it's open source, will grow very quickly. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new module and call this custom actions tutorial. So let's create that guy. And I'm just going to create a very simple system here. Alright, there we go. And let's go ahead and just listen for the game ready event. Do my custom action. And we'll leave the group empty because we just want to process this as if it's a global event. No context for this guy. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually create the action directly in code so I can show you how it's done. But you can actually create a custom action here, and it allows you to define the outputs, inputs, and branches. I'll show you what this means in code, but just so you know, you can do it here and then open up the class from here. This is just at your disposal. If you want to use this, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. You can just go straight into code and write your actions. So I'm going to delete this before it gets too far into there. So we got this, and we want to do some kind of action. So we're going to create a custom action that determines whether or not everything this if we're running inside of the editor or not. So let's just go over here to code. I've already got a folder here for custom action, so I'll just use this at my disposal and create a new C# script, and we'll do is application, or let's just call it my custom action library. There we go. Let's go ahead and open this guy up. All right. So one thing we want to include is using uFrame.attributes. This is very important when creating actions. So I'm going to get rid of these for now. And I'm going to show you both ways to create an action here. So public, let's create the actual class version first. So let's do is editor UF action, or let's call it is Unity editor. So now let's create a bool result. So if they just want to get the Boolean value, they can do that. So we'll call this an out. If we're going to create a input variable, it would simply work just like this. And actually these should be fields. And this guy should be in. So these are both attributes. It makes it very easy to define inputs and outputs for your actions. So let's remove this guy, or remove this field because we don't need him. We're going to override, execute. That's the main method for UF action. So we want to make this action easy to use, so let's create a out And if you use an action, which is part of the .NET library inside of the system namespace, this is a special thing for uFrame because when it sees this, it knows that it's actually a branch. So if you define out on it, because it looks like it's going out, you can define custom branches this way. Alright, so what we're going to do is firstly result equals editor, or application is editor, and then we'll say if result else so right here we want to always make sure that the action is not null. Then let's invoke it. If no is not equal to null, no. Alright, there you have it. One thing to note in this too, as far as creating actions, if you have some kind of a sync action, wherever the result is, set any variable right before you invoke the branch, and it'll be available whenever that branch executes. So if we were doing a for loop, we would want to set the item or index value inside of the actual loop right before we call this guy, and then all works as expected. Alright, so now that we've got this, we need to define a action title, and this just describes what this is. So we'll say is Unity editor, and if we want, we can define categories for this. So in uFrame ECS, you can define multiple categories for this item. So we'll say application, and maybe it's inside of the Unity category. Alright. Alright, so this is one way to create an action. You can also create actions very fast if you don't want to go through all this and you just want something quick and dirty. You can create your own my custom action library. You can create an action library that has a bunch of static methods, and it'll actually load this library for you. So let's call this action library. That's the key attribute for action libraries. And there's no parameters for that. And we can define a category for this as well. Actually, no, you don't define that on the action library. So let's create a method, and we'll call this is Unity editor static, and we'll define a string, or no, string. We'll define the same things we defined here. So we can define this as bool right here. But if we have multiple parameters, so say for instance we had a string that we also wanted to be as an output, just do the standard out on the string here, and uFrame is smart enough to read that in. For now, we'll just stick with the result as bool, and it'll automatically get a output variable for the result. So let's define a action for yes, so it'll read this as a branch as well. And we can just go ahead and copy this, rename it to result, and we'll say the yes guy is right there. No and no. Let's make sure we both return the result. I'm just going to paste this action title right here and call it is Unity Editor static. This makes sure it's registered with the system. Alright, that should be all we have to do. Now let's switch back to Unity. Alright, so let's add our is editor. Oops, is Unity editor. Here's our static one. As you see, we've got yes and no in result. And we've got the actual one with the appropriate categories on here. So the is Unity editor. Same thing, two different ways of doing it. Alright, that concludes this tutorial.